This is Not Your Father's Fundraising Podcast, a podcast about, you guessed it, nonprofit fundraising. This isn't the first podcast about it, but definitely not like any others you've listened to. This is a podcast for fundraisers, by fundraisers. No boring charts or the same stale best practices you've heard for years. No ideas that only work in theory here. No concepts from people who aren't in the same trenches as you are every single day. Each week, you'll get practical strategies and tips to craft messages that engage donors and raise more money. This isn't smoke and mirrors. Everything has been pressure tested in the real world. Plus, you can start using them as soon as the episode ends. Now, here are your hosts, Ryan Thomas and Steve Thomas.
Hi, welcome to Not Your Father's Fundraising Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Thomas.
And I'm Steve Thomas.
And this is episode 9.
Woo.
Leader Voice, Why Your Donors Need to Know Your CEO Collects Stamps. I'm Vice President at Oneicity, and that's Oneicity.com. And your CEO...
I was waiting for you to talk about the company, so that's great. I'm Steve Thomas, CEO and one of the founding partners of Oneicity, which is a boutique ad agency doing marketing and fundraising for nonprofits.
Anyone who's listened up until now is going to be excited that we're changing up who does what.
Yeah, there are people who are keeping score, like, oh wow, he did the intro last time. He did a 9 on the intro. Well, I like that better than that Ryan guy.
Yeah, send in your preferred intro person, and we could change the rundown. If you are one of those people who are keeping score at home, you may have also figured out or noticed that we share a last name.
Thomas.
It's in this case, it's not just because it's extremely common in the phone book or
one of those
I guess it's Google now. It's yellowpages.com. But so that hopefully makes the podcast name make a little more sense. Maybe
at some
it's
point,
funnier.
I'm going to be more direct about that and just make it very specific.
Yeah, I guess.
But not
I'll
this
be,
time.
Well, I'll be direct. I'll be direct next week.
Another time. Okay.
This is a 2-parter episode anyway, forward tease.
Yeah.
But we started this podcast because we have these conversations all the time, and we're sitting at a table, not exactly like this, but
it's a little different.
It's a little different, but we would have these conversations. And if you're a fundraiser, you know that the work doesn't stop at 5 o'clock. It doesn't stop on Friday. The weekends and the evening, you're having these conversations and you're thinking about the work. And we were having these conversations and realized, wait, we could record this and someone else could sit with us, quote unquote, inverted commas, and join us. We kind of had a podcast before we got microphones, and it was pretty cool.
The Blooming Onion episode was one of the best ones.
It really was one of the best, and I can't remember what number that is.
Heavily rated.
It is. It's our highest rated episode. I just can't remember what number it is. You'll also figure out we record this at dinner time or recently post dinner time, so the cookbook analogies and the appetizer references are going to be on point.
It's all about the food, man. Always.
It is.
Okay.
But we've been around more than a decade, and again, it's Oneicity. Get close. .com. Oh, yeah. I remember those old Yahoo commercials. Yeah. But if you get close enough, Google will take care of the rest. And where you need to be very specific is podcast at Oneicity, which is where we want you to send any questions. We'll take all feedback now.
So now we've kind of gotten the scab pulled off, and
we're out of beta, I guess. So previously, if you haven't listened to all of our episodes, we only wanted positive, perfect feedback. We're open to everything.
We can take it.
We've hired a therapist, so we can handle your constructive criticism. Hey guys, this is a great podcast, but
just don't start with "in love." That's a clear signal something brutal is coming.
Oh, that's horrible.
Okay,
so send questions, comments. I wish you guys would talk about this, or
absolutely.
I was thinking about this on your show, this episode that made me think of this.
Or here's $100. I want to be a guest.
Yeah, I email that, and I'll give my Venmo username. I'll send it back to you. But so we've been doing this, and we want your feedback. We want your 5-star reviews, and normally we do a lot of things. We cover a lot of ground. We talk about a lot of types of things, but in this episode, we're going to boil it down. We're going to lose some things or miss some steps because this leader voice thing that we're talking about.
That's that whole stamp thing, right?
Yeah, stamp collecting.
Okay.
It's kind of weird at first, and it takes a lot to unpack, and it takes so much to unpack that we're going to do it in 2 parts, which isn't just because of the podcast. You and I know unpacking this for somebody takes 2 conversations.
At least.
And so we're going to do it in that way with you.
And fair warning, this is something that is typically a little awkward, particularly for the leader. It is a place where that is sort of like you have to say, don't judge yet. Reserve your judgment till we
Stay with us to the end of the last slide.
all the way out. Yeah. So.
And we don't have a definition round, but by leader, we're in this case using that to define anyone, the person who it is who's signing your fundraising impacts.
Who speaks for the overall organization. And typically that's going to be an executive director, CEO role. But there are situations where we've dealt with international organizations, and there'll be country leaders and that kind of thing. So you have the right terminology with voice. It's who's voicing this,
and you'll know what's right for you. It's we're just going to bulk all of it into leader, but you'll know what works for you and what you got to do.
Yep. So
we're going to get to that, and like Steve said, it's going to be awkward. It's going to be a lot to unpack, but it's a place that once you and I wrapped our heads around this and built it, we've seen a lot of impact, no pun intended, out of it. But we're going to start with something you should be doing if you're not already. And this is something that you can enact as soon as the episode's over. Don't wait. Listen to the rest of the episode. But you can enact it this morning or this afternoon or this evening or tomorrow. And I'm going to throw to you to go first.
Oh, okay. So you need to call your Aunt Ruby is my number one answer, and that is
okay.
Yeah. So my mother's older
we did say this was a family podcast.
It is a family podcast. So my mother's older sister was a woman named named Ruby, Aunt Ruby. And in the early days of Oneicity, one of the things that we lighted upon was many of the people that we were connecting with were doing their own work. It was all internal. A lot of in-house agencies, a lot of single shops, a lot of that kind of thing. And so one of the things that we recognized was that there's if you're doing all of the work, it's really easy to miss a step or to make an assumption nobody else is tracking with you. And so the analogy, and my Aunt Ruby has passed on, so we don't use Aunt Ruby anymore, but it is the idea of finding someone who's an outsider. And I love finding someone who, and forgive me for saying it this way, someone who's older and a little less technologically sound. They're the people.
Even if you're in direct mail, thinking through these things.
In everything you do, it's not a bad idea to have an Aunt Ruby review.
Just that technically unsound. If you have to help them set up their iPhone,
that's the perfect person. Because you and I were talking this morning about a website that we are working on for a client, and one of the things that we were talking about was how easy it is to miss. And that's one of the reasons that I thought about talking about this today. It's so easy to miss an assumption or to make an assumption that nobody else except the insiders are following around on. So if you get a website going, if you have a new newsletter, if you've got a very important impact, find someone who's not inside your organization. Don't tell them what to think about. Just say, hey, we'd like you to look at this and give me your feedback on not how pretty it is or anything like that. But do you know what this is about? Do you know what the actions are? Can they identify a call to action? Can they find their way through a website or something like that? Or if they came to the website, do they know who you are? The reason you want to find somebody who's not your mom or someone who's not your spouse or significant other is you don't want someone who already knows what you're trying to do. You're looking for someone who is interested, but they're not involved, so that they can give you that feedback. It is so easy to miss big steps. I've seen that over and over again where we reviewed other people's work, and at times and you look at it and go, wow, they have made a big step from step 1 to step 3. Step 2 is humongous and nobody else is traveling.
We've come in and consulted in that situation and wondered, I don't know what you do. Because there have been times where it's, okay, joining this client, didn't get onboarded, just here you go, and you read some of the work, and
because everyone's supposed to know, and I'm doing you did call it inverted commas, bunny
commas.
Ears. You're supposed to know, and if you don't know, you're like, who are these guys? What are they about? Why would I give them any money? Or
and
why
somebody
would I be
will say,
involved?
well, they know us. We've been around. We've been sending letters. They should know.
They just should know.
They should know.
They don't. They just don't.
Donors are coming in and out.
Yeah.
Their life. So
Yeah. So
Aunt Ruby.
There you have it. Aunt Ruby. Use that as code.
That's really good. Mine is that you should be giving to another organization.
Like yours?
Yeah, like yours or separate.
Okay.
So it depends on funds, how many gifts you want to do. And I'm not talking big gifts, $20, $25 is usually what I do. If you've got enough to give to an organization that is very much like you, and then a big national organization, and then another local organization,
yeah, okay,
who may not be like your work, but it's still going to be a competitor for your donor's attention.
Yeah.
And the idea is you want to know a couple things, and this will absolutely teach you a couple things. It will fill your mailbox, but it will teach you what the big guys, the big massive organizations,
bunny ears, big guys,
inverted commas, the big guys, what are they putting out? What are they making and sending that maybe you could draw something from? And what is an organization who, regardless of size, is like you, is in your space? What are they doing and sending? And then someone in your area, regardless of space, what are they sending? Because you want to envision your mail and their mail in the same stack, that the donors, walking up from the mailbox, and I sift through on the way to the door, and I like to be done before I'm at the door.
Yeah.
And so you want to know what all that looks like. What ideas can I get from these guys?
Get their emails, get multiple emails in your inbox and be able to just look at subject lines, yours and theirs. Ooh, that's nice.
And then that's the ongoing thing you'll get initially. You'll learn how they onboard donors. What's it like to be a new donor? And you can see, somebody in your organization may be saying, we need to have an 8-step new donor funnel. And then you may have always thought this was a dumb idea. Spoiler alert, it is. But if you give to a big, massive organization with name recognition, then that helps you say, hey, why should we do something that so-and-so, who we all agree is doing great work, isn't doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
So spend $100, give to 4 organizations, and I like to go about every 18 to 24 months, because then it lets me then go lapsed.
Become a little bit of a
And
lapsed
I want to see, how do you try to get me back? and then you'll get on cold lists. It becomes fun. So spend $100, give to orgs.
Yeah.
You'll learn a lot.
They could hire you for $100 and you do nearly the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, hey, like I said, my Venmo is open.
You
so
can get it for $100.
Yeah, I got to look up my Venmo username, but I'll look it up and I'll put it in the show notes.
Okay. Okay.
We work for nonprofits, but we are very for profit. So,
You're not going to cut that, are you?
We don't have an intern to cut it,
All right,
so
good.
it's leaving in there.
Leave it, stay in it.
So, getting to the topic of the episode, we call this leader voice. We're just going to refer to that in this space. It's not trademarked yet, but that's what we're going to call it. And it starts with a phrase you first told me when I first started, and I've heard lots of other people use it, is people give to people. And we see that often when, that's why people are featured faces on response devices, on outer envelopes, on banners and emails, donation pages. You want a donor to see the person who's on the other end of this mail, on the other end of this donation page. You're not giving money, you're helping someone at the other end.
Yeah. Not talking about because you can't, thankfully, show a picture of an organization as much as people sadly try. It is, you show the people, or it's a very noble effort. One of our favorite charities is the Elephant Sanctuary, and the elephants are named. I mean, you can get their pictures and their names, and you know their history. So yes, it's about people, but it's also a one-to-one individual kind of thing on that end of the festivities.
Yeah. And so we all agree that's true.
Right.
We also, and that's you and I in this and our team, believe that it's also true people give to people in a donor organization relationship or that exchange.
So I'll rewind just very briefly, and let's just say, hopefully you are not, as a nonprofit, speaking in third person corporate.
That's great. I was going to point out a great way to test that this is true.
Pronoun choices,
and
right?
We've done this before with a client, is to say, okay, just take your next email, A/B test that thing from organization name, from name of leader.
Yep.
Or you could almost pick any name.
Pick a person.
But we've done that a few times, never seen the name of the person not win by a landslide.
Yeah. Even if some of the open rates may not be startlingly different, the click-throughs, call to actions are startlingly different.
Yeah, your overall performance is going to be much better.
Yeah.
And so taking that person, once we agree, okay, people give to people, we agree that we should have a name in the email at the bottom of the letter.
Or the letter. Or
whatever.
Yeah.
Why do I care if they collect stamps? Why should I even tell my donors they collect stamps? Well, because all we've established at this point is that there's a name at the bottom of that letter. There's no person here yet.
Good. Yeah.
I'm gonna date myself, but there was a show, Blue's Clues, back in the day. I mean, I didn't actually watch it. You didn't. I watched it ironically in high school. You didn't have to actually watch it with me, but I would turn it on, and hey, high school junior me loved a show where I got all the answers right really fast. So Blue's Clues was up my alley. But
that was the guy in the big sofa chair, right?
Well, yeah, he'd sit in with the sofa chair, and that's when he had all the clues, but he had to think.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, it's a Blue's Clues deep cut.
Clues. I like it.
But in every episode or most episodes, they would hop inside of a book, and then later they would come out of the book. And so what you're wanting to do, and the way we kind of explain it to a leader and the team, is if we could take you, Mr. and Mrs. Leader, clone you thousands of times and get you in everyone's living room, that would be phenomenal. And your donors would love it. Your relationships, everything would increase.
Accounting would love it. Yeah.
Yeah. The CFO, donor processing might not love it, but everybody else would love it.
Yeah.
And what we try, and they nod. Yeah, that'd be great. So this is an attempt to get you, Mrs. Leader, to pop off that page and into the donor's living room without holograms or, having you spend your entire life visiting donors. And okay, that sounds good to use a name. It sounds good to get them to jump off a page because, my donors love my person.
Not everybody's going to agree with that, but I'll just say for those who are afraid of ego or they have the same self-esteem damage I have, it's like I got to do that because not that I love it or that I believe my donors love it, but it is good for the organization.
The calling.
Exactly.
So once we're to that point, sadly, that was the easy part. getting those yeses. In fundraising, we build out the character of the leader. And one way you described it to somebody early on when we were pitching this crazy idea to people was that we mean it in both definitions of the word, both the character in the who you are,
Values, what drives you,
the heart, and then the character and
the quirkiness.
And that none of this is fake, but all of the things we talk about and present in the image and this character of the leader are things that need to be true, but also okay for public consumption. And so how do we build out that three-dimensional personhood? And it's not easy. And just spoiler alert on the next episode is when we're going to talk through the how you do that for a nonprofit.
So this
leader.
is the theory, and the practice is next.
You're buying into it. You're seeing how this works.
Yeah. So people like you were in college, they're just going to fast forward to the next episode and get the...
Yeah, but unless you're listening to us live, most people let episodes stack up like on Netflix. So, they're just going to...
So they're just binge listening.
Yeah, they're binge listening, and they've already gotten the thing they should be doing if they're not already. So, awesome. They're going to drop off at that. So, we took a method that you first ran into in the for-profit world and apply it to nonprofit. Like many of the great ideas, it starts in the big fat cat's monopoly man making money, and we apply it to the guys saving the world.
Yeah. Well, the reason that works so well, if you don't just completely port it identically out of the for-profit world, is those guys often have one mandate, which is make their shareholders money, and that means if it doesn't work, it don't last. And so what works survives. It gets iterated on. It gets improved, and so this is a tested method. You want me to go ahead and talk about?
Let's get into it.
Okay, this is a tested method that began in screenplay writing in showbiz. A guy named David Freeman, who the list of things he and his disciples have worked on are the things you'd know. Not as many of them are fresh, but it's things like The Simpsons,
House, the TV show,
X-Files, Cheers. These were used, to develop characters. So one of the lines that just resonates so crisply with me that I hope people will grab is. One of the things about storytelling. Storytelling is a genre that has lasted since we were sitting around campfires as people, right? And so storytelling is well known, and in the modern era of screenplays and television, storytelling kind of evolved in that I wasn't hearing one narrative for the first time, one and done, and now the minstrel strolls off to the next little hamlet. The goal of the people designing a show like Cheers, for example, or Blue's Clues, is to keep you coming back. So one of the things to hear is one of the mantras out of the screenplay business is that plot helps you stay to the end of the movie. That's plot. And
that's why I watch the whole 2 hours or 3 hours in Christopher Nolan.
Exactly. It's why you stay through all of the Indiana Jones movies, or pick whatever movie. But character is what keeps you watching episode after episode after episode of a TV show. It is not the plot; it's the characters. And so one of the things that Freeman and his disciples, of which, in a weird way we are disciples, not writing screenplays, but writing and using his methods. And this, I need to give credit. This came from Roy Williams, Wizard of Ads guy down in Austin, who we have a business relationship with, and who uses this for big time for-profit copywriting. So character's what calls you to watch to the end. And when you think about your fundraising, you're episodic. You're not one movie, hopefully. And so,
that's really interesting.
You want to keep people coming back and not going, oh gosh, I know how this movie
I've seen
ends.
this one.
I've seen this one. Let's just fast forward.
What else
right?
is on?
Yeah, surely there's something else going on Netflix. So, you are working very hard, like someone who's writing an episodic television show, to not only have some plot, that's your ask, but the people need to know, they need to fall in love with the characters. They need to root for the people that they're hearing about, or the individuals they're hearing about. And so this comes out of that stuff. And so much like all the traditional fundraising approach, you're trying to build a relationship, you're trying to build a connection. Your example of being in someone's living room, this is very much about how do we fit? And it occurred to me, weirdly enough, I was talking to a client today about this podcast, and this is not a traditional fundraising podcast. If there is such a thing exists.
I mean, you might say this isn't your father's fundraising podcast.
Yeah,
I mean,
another title.
One might say that.
In that, someday we're gonna have video, and in this lavish new studio that we built, and so this is you and me and a listener, not in clicking through PowerPoint. I haven't worn a tie in like 400 days. I mean, this is very casual. And we're wanting people to not only get great information and very actionable stuff, we want to reveal a little bit about who you are and about who I am, because that helps them sort out whether they're kind of people or not.
Because the goal, to your point, for a second I didn't see where you're going, but now I do, is we aren't episodic. We hope you listen to all our episodes.
Right.
And so the reason you're going to stay around are not necessarily because of our dulcet tones, but because...
And we know how this ends. We kick it, we
have a lot of fun.
Yeah. So it's very important to understand that I'm not saying you should have light banter in your newsletter or your fundraising appeal or on your website, but you reveal the personhood of the leader in the same way you and I are revealing our personhood as we go through this podcast.
That's really smart. That's a really good
your idea.
Analogy.
So
well, yeah, I'm just saying it. Like I said, I wasn't sure where you were.
So now you gotta tell them. Okay, get into this.
So what's it called? Because you said it's a thing we took from the nonprofit.
Yeah, so it's called a character diamond in the screenplay world. And this is a way of envisioning a character or fleshing out a character that's already been thought of.
And so diamond...
picture a baseball.
Picture a baseball diamond.
Where I click in PowerPoint to a diamond.
We can...
Not a baseball diamond, not a jewelry diamond.
Yeah, not a jewelry diamond. If we had Clippy, you could say, it looks like you're trying to explain something complicated. Would you like some help?
Yes, please.
Sure would.
Okay.
So picture a baseball diamond.
Right.
And
second base,
is
first
up top.
base.
Yeah. Second base is at 12 o'clock.
Right. At 6 o'clock is...
6 o'clock is home base.
Okay.
9 o'clock.
The way I'm looking at that
I
clock.
can't tell which way you're pointing. 9 o'clock is third base.
Right.
3 o'clock is first base. And who's on first?
Yeah.
And so we'll start with Second base, top of the diamond, 12 o'clock. The North Star, it's the obvious thing about this person, this character.
When you first meet or hear from them, it's obvious. And probably for many nonprofit executives, that most obvious thing is maybe their leadership of the organization. They're speaking for the organization. Now we need to say this is a lot like resume writing in that you don't want to reveal deepest, darkest secrets.
Yeah, we're going to get to weakness, and it's not your which we got a wide eye from someone when we got to that. So we've started putting that in to cut down on that. But so 12 o'clock, second base, North Star, the obvious thing. Somebody could almost see from afar about you
or hear about
the leader.
If they say, "Who that Ryan Thomas," and then they would go, "He's the," and they would just fill that in, whatever that would be, based on what they have seen and know you.
Yeah.
But that is so superficial, and in all candor, that has no stickiness. That is like off the charts and non-stickiness.
And sticky meaning stick in the brain. If it doesn't stick in the brain, the donor's checking out and they're chucking your mail into the trash.
Checking out and
chucking out. So second base. Now we're going to go to home plate, 6 o'clock.
Opposite of the North Star, the top, the second base. This is counter star. This is the
hidden, the surprise. It often runs either fully 180 degrees counter to the North Star, or is something that, while doesn't conflict with your North Star, is unexpected. Like you talked about, they use this in-house for Dr. House. His North Star is that he's a doctor.
And very good at what he does.
And an excellent, one of the best in the world at figuring out the problem and the symptoms with people. And then his counterstar is that he's addicted to, I think he was addicted to Oxycontin, but he's a heroin addict. Yeah. And so that
sort of, that wasn't what I was expecting.
You wouldn't expect that.
Yeah.
And that would be why you would keep watching or a doctor show, or what would set this doctor show apart from others is, well, wait a minute.
That wasn't Marcus Welby's problem.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah, exactly. So, and so, all right. So we have those two, let's call it, we can even say that's the x-axis.
Yep.
The vertical axis.
No, that's the y-axis.
That's the y-axis. Okay, I was good at geometry too. Okay,
well,
that was the y-axis. Sorry.
This is spoiler alert, he doesn't do the data for Oneicity.
Okay, all right. So now what?
So then let's go to third base, which
9 o'clock.
9 o'clock.
And the x-axis.
9 o'clock on the x-axis is the weakness, the vulnerability.
A flaw, maybe.
Mm-hmm. And again, it's a resume flaw.
Don't get nervous. This is like in a job interview when the board says, so, what's your greatest weakness? I just care too much. I just can't turn loose of a problem until it is absolutely
perfectly.
solved.
Right. One of mine, because we we did this with our team, was one of my flaws is that I have to be on time. And I will leave. If you have another mode of transportation, I will leave you at home. I will break the speed limit. I have gotten dirty looks from moms at church and parking lots because I was late for second service and I'm speeding through the parking lot. I have to be on time. But
so that's a weakness and a vulnerability.
But a resume one.
It relatively. Yeah, the whole running over moms in parking lots is probably not.
I didn't run her over. I just got a bad look. I got a dirty look.
Okay.
So 12 o'clock is obvious North Star. 6 o'clock home plate is counterstar, the surprise. Mm-hmm. Third base, 9 o'clock.
Vulnerability.
Is your vulnerability.
Maybe a flaw, but again, a resume flaw.
Mm-hmm. And it's, it's some that begins to flesh you out, and that, okay, it's not just that you're surface and surprise. Wait, there's something to you that makes you human. Mm-hmm. And then first base is your, I actually don't know that the real term down here in the South, we say that's the hill you're going to die on.
Yeah. It's your core identity.
That's it.
Your number one value as a leader of this organization. Now that's, if you're a family person, your family comes first, faith comes first. But again, in the resume and the public reveal, this is the piece that you just, it is the hill you're going to die on. And it is the thing that you both say out loud, point to, and reveal in your actions to your donors.
Then we're going to get to next week. You don't say, "Dear donor, the hill I'm going to die on is."
Well,
and if you don't want me to die on that hill, you should give $27.17 to our summer program for the kids. So the example that drove it home for me, and again, bringing the listeners into this, we've done this a few times. We've tried lots of examples to try to get the questioning looks off people's faces. Arthur Fonzarelli, the Fonz.
the Fonz.
Is
Oh, that was pretty good.
that's not bad.
That wasn't bad.
Is the best example of that. There are lots of examples, but he's very known even if you're my age or a little younger. So his, and I'm looking at my notes so I don't get it right.
Happy Days.
Yeah,
right?
Happy Days.
Yeah.
And Mork and Mindy in one episode.
Oh, I missed that.
I just know
You
the
Google.
long story. Yeah.
Okay.
So his North Star, his 12 o'clock for the Fonz is he's a tough guy.
Leather jacket,
The white shirt
pop
under.
collar.
He hits the jukebox and it
Oh,
fixes.
that's right. Yeah.
He's
And
a
everybody's
tough guy.
afraid of him.
Yep.
Yeah.
Everybody knows him.
Yeah.
And everybody knows you stay away from him. He's cool, but he's edgy.
Yeah.
The counter star, 6 o'clock, home base,
This is the surprise.
The
What you
surprise.
wouldn't expect.
is that he's a really loyal friend.
Yeah.
Ooh, James Dean on the outside, but a teddy bear on the inside about that.
Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah,
we,
well, that's a good
with
one.
the switchblade.
Yeah.
We saw. You see that in his relationship with. Is it Richie? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And Mrs. Cunningham.
Yeah, that's right. And so then his third base, his 9 o'clock, his vulnerability, weakness is that he can't admit he's wrong. I don't know anybody
I'm
like
so
that.
glad I don't have that problem.
Yeah, wow.
Okay. Yeah. So
I just like to be punctual.
he wrestles with anything that makes him look less than his image.
And the reason that matters is because the hill he's going to die on, his core identity is he will always be cool.
No matter what.
If he's wrong, he's going to be wrong and cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you're right, like the Fonz. You open with
Hey. We'll let you look, Google or use Siri voice to text to figure out how you spell that. So again, how you do that is next week.
right.
But well, that's
are
the
we
Fonz.
talking some about the? What else?
I was
going to leave him hanging.
No, of course not.
Okay.
Here's an example of a leader who, while we planned this in advance, not enough where I could get in front of this to get clearance to list the name. So I'm going to work really hard not to say the name.
I can't wait to see how
That's
this
not going
works.
to work. But we've applied the Fonz and this logic, this character diamond, to a leader of a nonprofit. And her 12 o'clock North Star is that she's a Silicon Valley female CEO. You know that about her when you first meet her or when she first comes on your radar. Her organization is in Silicon Valley. She's a CEO.
She's sharp. Might wear Armani if I knew what Armani looked like on somebody in real life. But
Yeah.
but she's that she mingles well with the Salesforce world.
And you would know that she is a Silicon Valley CEO from the look. And it's important to remember or realize that we didn't say Silicon Valley nonprofit female CEO. She looks like she could be in Apple or Facebook or any of the other big organizations that are on our phones in Silicon Valley.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's her 12 o'clock, her North Star. Her counter star is that she is a prayer warrior. And she's one of the biggest and most effective and fervent prayer warriors I think I know in and out of work.
Yeah, and exactly sort of the literally the opposite of what the appearance is. someone who is very interested in, it seems like somehow, everyone's needs or struggles, and willing, not in a creepy way or not in a showy way, but she that is part of who she is.
She was one of the first person to email and text us about this podcast. And this, she cares about, that's a great way of putting it. She cares about everybody's wants, needs, and desires. So 12 o'clock, North Star, Silicon Valley female CEO, but she's also a prayer warrior.
Ooh, that wasn't what I was expecting. Maybe. Although her organization is very faith-based.
Of course.
And so that fits very well in the organization. Okay.
But when you see her,
Yeah.
she does. She just looks like a CEO in the Valley.
Yeah.
You don't know that she's at faith-based. So surprise is that she's a prayer warrior. The resume weakness, vulnerability, is that she's a workaholic. And the hill that she's going to die on.
Back up one. So that by our observation and testing and her validation, that it was like and by workaholic we mean she doesn't clock out at 5 o'clock if she ever clocks out, and she takes care of herself in her personhood. She's not completely burning herself down, but it's not unusual for her to be. Their organization has people there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it's not unusual for her to be around in the non-executive work hours of 9 to 5.
Saturday at 4:30,
Yeah, exactly.
you'll see her checking in on Instagram, just checking in to see how people are doing. Not coming in to supervise or do
Or for
work.
the glory of, look at me at 3 o'clock on Saturday afternoon.
Just coming by because that's her heart. That's where she is.
So that's her vulnerability, her weakness, her flaw, resume flaw, LinkedIn flaw. Okay.
And the hill that she will die on, her core identity, is that she'll do anything for kids.
Yeah. The part of this organization, they help kids who are experiencing homelessness, whose parents or they have experienced domestic violence or a variety of abuse, and there's in a good way, a ferociousness about the focus on taking care of kids, and that is a little different than what you'd expect from a sharp-dressed
Female CEO in the Valley.
Yeah,
She's a prayer warrior, but
willing to get down and color with those little kids, and that's a big deal.
And routinely says that's the best part of her day, or where she goes when it's been a hard day or a hard week. To fill her cup, she loves to go visit their kid rooms and their kid program and be with the children.
So one of the things that now that we've kind of run this down for them and given them an example, one of the things to make clear is that we're talking about a way of thinking about defining characteristics that make the person, the leader, think and speak and act and move in the world as they do, because that allows the donor or the prospective donor to get a glimpse of the person that's behind all of this, who is putting their name and personhood and saying, you should give to this organization because I, as the leader, am asking you to do that. And if I know something about that person beyond, you're just trying to pay the bills and meet the budget.
It's your job to come tell me that.
The more that gets revealed in a very strategic way. Now, one of the things that made me nervous about making this a topic on the podcast is done badly. This is worse than not doing fundraising.
Yeah.
Because you actually will turn people off. And so don't start this until you've listened to the next episode.
Well, and this is not something you should be doing if you're not already, and you can enact when the episode's over. This is the exact opposite of something easy to do. This is the long tail.
But the reason it's worth it is that one of the things that we don't talk about Oneicity work, but one of the things that I will say is the clients that we have been doing this for longer than, let's call it 18 months. They not only weathered the COVID, the pandemic, all of that disruption, both economic and just attention wise, they soared. We have clients who did startlingly well, with results where you go, can we just rerun those numbers? Because it's really surprising.
Doesn't make sense.
That good. And one of the elements, not the only, but one of the elements is how real the leaders are to the donors.
Because it's another person on the other end of their decision to give or not in the middle of a pandemic or an economic downturn.
Yep.
And so one, I didn't type it, I didn't bring it, but an example of a time we used this for our female CEO, before I say her name, is in an appeal. We mentioned, I think it was at the start of the letter, I was working late one night and I realized that I hadn't seen the kids all day and I was packing up to leave, and on my way out to my car,
even though it was nearly 9 o'clock at night,
I stopped by where the kids are and I read them bedtime stories. And so by doing that, we got across to a donor, and this was literally the lead of an appeal letter.
It's a tiny piece.
She's a workaholic in that family. She's working late at 9 o'clock. Cares about these kids because, wait, I haven't seen them all day. But then I'm going to go do something about that because that's the hill I'm going to die on. That's my core identity. That's what fills my cup. I love these kids. So even though it's 9 o'clock, even though I've been working 12, 15 hours, I'm going to go by and, by golly, I'm going to read them a bedtime story.
And one of the things that then that impact went on to roll out is the challenges and the difficulties of these kids that this leader is able to talk about from a first person. She has not experienced that, but the donor quickly has in their mind the CEO with a big old bedtime book, and it is a perception thing. You're creating this perception around facts, right? So it's not like these aren't true, but you're creating this perception. So when the CEO then says, here's what these kids struggle with, it is clear to the donor that this person knows, not only because it's been reported by her case management staff or any of that stuff, she knows these kids.
She's not reading this off a flashcard.
No, this is not out of a chart. This is out of this little kid sitting next to her with, and I, it's like I got ice cream around my mouth. And, that makes it real. And that's one of the keys that so many nonprofit fundraisers, as they get into this business and as they're sorting out how to do this, is they make it so antiseptic and so formulaic. Oh, I make the donor the hero. Oh, all I have to do is have a very specific ask. All I have to do is handle, the scaffolding, the fundraising scaffolding, which is what we do. But it has to be, you have to breathe life in it. You have to make it alive and a person talking to a person, so that me, the receiver, is willing to not only say, I'm going to give deeply because I get you as a leader and I understand something about you.
And there's a trust in that. I trust that you know what you're talking about, your heart's in the right place. You are going to do with this what I would want you to do for these kids, because I can't.
One of the things that's so good about this character diamond and the leader voice is it makes you use the language of makes the leader come off the page. It allows for a multi-dimension leader. Now, you don't want to be telling your life story. You're looking for ways to season communications with the authenticity of the individual who is on whose behalf you're writing, on who is the leader.
This is as close as I'll get to practical application. But as you talked about with this female CEO and the kids, is because we then were unpacking a topic about kids, and this was giving to the kids program, that story made sense. It tied in. It was natural. It was part of that DNA. Probably would have worked and probably would have had some response and resonated with donors had it been about the children's mothers. Mm-hmm. But it really tied in nicely that she starts talking about children and experience she has with children. I need you to help me help these children.
Yeah. And one of the things to recognize is the secret to our clients' success is they have one and all bought into the idea that it is not about a single impact. Yes, we'll measure. Yes, we'll get
charts and graphs
boringly
and
granular.
You'll get the X and Y axis correct.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. But the fact that this is not only for the moment, this is the long haul. We're looking for lifetime relationships with donors. We're looking for not funding a single month. We're looking at funding year after year after year for a nonprofit. And this strategy plays to that so strongly because it is not about how much freight can I pack into this single impact. It is about how might I reveal a tiny bit of who I am as a leader. It is exactly like speakers tell stories about themselves. If they're good speakers, they're strategic about what story they tell. And they are not about. Well, I mean, one of the reasons that I not only joke, but it's true. I have some struggles with self-esteem. In the book that we wrote, one of the things that my editor encouraged me to do was to tell my failure stories. Because I was a lousy fundraiser when I was a CEO. CEO of a nonprofit.
Yeah,
I'm a pretty good
should
fundraiser
clarify.
now. Thank you. You're supposed to fix those. But people root for the underdog. They love, and again, this is a place, and one of the things that we have studied and our copywriters pay attention to is the way stories unfold. And part of the if you're a Joseph Campbell fan with the hero's journey or any of those plot devising, the struggle, the failure you learn from, those are all critical components to keep the reader, the listener, the audience with you as the narrator. And that's who, if you're writing a nonprofit fundraising letter or website or email or newsletter, you're a narrator. You're the bard in the tavern telling the story, You're
the minstrel of the campfire.
You gotta keep them with you.
Well, and for every episode. And then, applying that
season.
And then next season.
And next season.
And
yeah.
To steal the TV or Netflix analogy, it is. I want you to pay attention not just to the end of this episode, appeal or email, but this whole season, fourth quarter, year end, this certain capital campaign, and then season 2 when we come back around to you. Mm-hmm. And that goes to your comment about wanting to forge deep relationships with a donor. Yeah. We're not looking for someone to watch 1 or 2 episodes and then check out. We want someone who, if this show were to get canceled, another streamer picks it up and people go get, I've had no use for Hulu, but they got my show. Yeah. I'm going over there. And those, we want donors who will install an app because that's the app that's got you.
Yeah. Well, if I got time to tell a quick story.
Yeah, I mean, they can't go anywhere.
Yeah, they can.
They could check out. So you better make it a good story.
I'm going to make it a good, quick story. So one of the leaders who was, I'm not going to say dubious, but really, I believe if we'd had a polygraph, we'd have known he was signing off on this more just because he trusted us in every other arena. But this didn't make any sense to him at all, I don't think. And one of the things that was so interesting as we began, and again, as we do this, and as you do this, and as you're going to talk to them about next week about the how-tos, you're not looking to back it all up and tell all your vulnerabilities and everything all in one. This is about a strategic process. But we salted a small thing out of his leader voice diamond piece into an impact that he had more than one person comment to him directly on. As I recall, was stopped in the grocery store by somebody locally saying, "Hey, you were saying that, and I am so with you on that." Well, again, that doesn't necessarily connect to fundraising or to dollars in the door, but what it does connect to is you are not a sterile, a faceless Greek chorus telling this story. You're a person wanting to help the donor, prospective donor, come into a world that's not theirs. And as you do that, you are wanting to make sure they know who you are as a person. And so all of our clients...
Not a name, but a person.
As a person. All of our clients, as we've done that. And again, I'll just say, you may not love the process or everything about this podcast that we're doing, but it is very much in the same vein of wanting to make sure that we are not doing a podcast like everybody else.
Yeah, and that
you weren't expecting that, were you?
I wasn't. We didn't want to do one like everybody else, but then also we understand the competition for attention, and so even if we did want to do one like anybody else, we know there's a lot out there. People already have listeners.
They've already got that.
We've got to come. We've got to do it a different way.
So it's the same with a fundraiser. Don't copy. Fill in the blank. Big X, Y, Z.
Don't start saying that your CEO was working late one night and went by the kids, and then we don't do kids.
So
we went by the whatever.
So one of the things that I was reading the bedtime stories to the dogs in our shelter. One of the things that Charity Water is one of those great big organizations that often people who are in this business at various points have looked to and gone, wow, they do great work. Let's do like them. Well, one of the problems with that is you're not them, and your leader doesn't have a story like them.
Yeah.
Your story told well. I almost without regard, we've done this a couple times in seminars, just said, let us help you craft your story, because you can have the most boring story, but as skilled outside storytellers can help you tell it 100% true, 100% factual, but oriented by the power of the outsider and the power of the skilled storyteller. Because this is about strategic storytelling. I mean, you've given me a hard time for ever since you were practically born about my telling stories.
With morals. Not just stories. Stories with morals.
With morals. It is about more than just telling a story. You have to have a point. And fundraising is about getting a story and a point and revealing a little bit about the storyteller. So that's my my weakness is my vulnerability is I tell stories with morals.
I
don't know.
You heard it. You heard it here. I didn't say it.
Previously, I've not admitted to any kind of vulnerability. So we'll just see. We'll wear that around a little bit.
It's your resume vulnerability. Well, so if you haven't checked out already, you're wondering.
They're hanging on the edge of their.
We've got them episode through episode. You're wondering, how do I do this? Mm-hmm. Okay, I bought in. That's great. Oh, I can see how this works. I can see how this is going to help us, but I don't know how to do it.
They haven't bought in yet. They have agreed about.
No, you don't say they have. Somebody's bought in.
No, they haven't bought in. Okay.
But even if they have bought in, whether you bought in or not, you don't know how to do this.
Don't do it until you
and
listen to the
do
next
not. Yeah, even if you've got to wait a week, no appeal you are
Stand by.
sending out is that important.
Hey, I'm late on some copy too, so just give it a pause.
Okay, he really is late on some copy. I got an email about it. It's my client, so it's gonna be fine.
It's gonna be fine.
Well, so next week, this was episode 9. So in episode 10, totally
This is
planned
sort of like
this.
one of those moments with an Agatha Christie play where the lights go off and you wait and have to see who got killed, right?
Oh, okay, yeah.
I don't know.
I thought she did Murder, She Wrote. So
No.
okay, all right. Well, so episode 9 was getting you to wrap your head around this weird leader voice thing and why you're
So
why
if
your
they
person
don't
should.
listen next week, the thing to do is reveal your personhood in your fundraising copy, strategically, carefully, but personhood.
Look for ways to reveal that and unwrap that onion.
Yeah.
That's great.
Okay.
Next week, we'll talk about how you execute it, both build it, establish it, and then execute it, put it into practice. And then also, because we won't have to do too much, but next week, we will also, after we do that,
It's going to be a 4-hour episode.
it's going to be great. But we're going to talk about how your acquisition strategy can really benefit from Formula One racing. Give us the 5-star reviews on wherever you get your podcast and send all your questions, your feedback to podcast
Even the harsh stuff.
even the harsh stuff
Yeah.
to podcast@oneicity.com.
I'm Steve Thomas.
I'm Ryan
Thanks so
Thomas.
much
Thanks for
to
listening.
this episode of Not Your Father's Fundraising Podcast. If you've enjoyed the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. We really appreciate that effort. Tune back in next week for another fresh episode of Not Your Father's Fundraising Podcast.